Are you the friend who's always being asked for health advice? Now imagine turning that passion into a fulfilling career with our Become a Nutrition Coach program. Step into a world where your enthusiasm for wellness becomes the heart of your own thriving business. With me as your professor and guide and coach on our user-friendly digital platform, you can learn from anywhere at your very own pace. It's perfect for your busy life. Envision empowering others to live their healthiest lives, all while growing a career you love. You're not just gaining a certification here, you're joining a community of like-minded professionals ready to support and celebrate with you every step of the way. So what are you waiting for? It's time to nourish your future and help change lives, including your own. Head over to nutritiouslife.com/BNC for a free class and a sneak peek of the program. Your journey to becoming a nutrition coach begins now. If you or anyone you know is struggling with thyroid issues or think you may be struggling with thyroid issues, you absolutely must listen to this episode. Welcome to the Living a Nutritious Life podcast. I'm Keri Glassman, your host, and this is your episode if you are interested in thyroid health, whether you work with patients or clients or you have an issue yourself. On this episode, I'm joined by McCall McPherson, an expert in thyroid health and founder of Modern Thyroid Clinic. McCall had her own personal struggles with her thyroid, which led her to focus her practice in on helping women with similar issues. She is so incredibly knowledgeable and passionate and is helping people all over the country via Modern Thyroid Clinic. I would say probably she's helping people all over the world with her incredible information she puts out into the world. In this conversation, we went over the nitty-gritty of thyroid health, what you need to know, what labs you must ask your doctor to run for you, why your medication may not be working for you, and why so many women go undiagnosed. You do not want to miss this episode filled with so much invaluable information. So, as always, please rate, review, and share if you love the episode. And now let's do this. Welcome to Living a Nutritious Life. I'm Keri Glassman, a celebrity registered dietitian nutritionist. Join me every Tuesday on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms as I bring in some heavy hitters to share the latest in nutrition and wellness science. We dive deep into food, sleep, stress, relationships, and so much more. Your weekly guide to a happier, healthier, more nutritious life. Welcome, McCall, to the Living a Nutritious Life podcast. I am so excited, chomping at the bit to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We get questions in the Nutritious Life community. I get questions from friends, family, clients, all the time about thyroid health. So I am so, like I just said, I am like raring to go here with all of the questions. We're probably going to need a part two, but we'll just get started here today. So let's actually start with really like the go-to thyroid expert. So can you give us just a little bit of your background? Like where did you get interested in health in general and then specifically thyroid health?
Yeah, I've always wanted, even as a kid, to be in medicine. And so pursued that in a way of being a physician associate, or what's now referred to as a physician, or what used to be a physician assistant, now is a physician associate, and came out practicing medicine in my dream job and was basically put flat on my back at 27 from a thyroid problem. I truly came home from work every day at 3:30 and I went to bed. Every hour that I was not at work, I was literally laying down, trying to recover enough from the day and prepare enough for the next day. And that went on for quite some time. I was already on thyroid meds. I was like, this really fits the bill for hypothyroidism. Everything's fine. I'll go to my doctor. He'll adjust my medicine. I'll be great. Did that and was totally blown off, sadly, like so many women when they go to their clinician are, and sent away, told me my labs were normal, and I was devastated. Went back, a month or two later, begged for a deeper look. Hey, can we check these labs? I brought in a little Post-it.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, like the only thing that matters is TSH. In fact, your TSH is too low. We need to reduce your medication. And I broke down. I was like, if you take anything else away from me, I will not be able to maintain my job. Um, at that point, I was kind of desperate and I looked for alternative, more progressive clinicians, waited 3 months to see one, saw him, and was on my way to getting my life back in a few short weeks. And very, very quickly, that physician became a mentor to me. And I
Mhm.
just devoured anything and everything I could in the realm of thyroid. And from that, from kind of my pain to purpose story, Modern
Mhm.
Thyroid Clinic was ultimately born. And now we get to create a place, for women where they're heard and believed and seen and understood. Even all of our clinicians have a thyroid problem personally. So we dedicate our lives now to women who I was once was. So it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more about Modern Thyroid Clinic.
Yeah. So Modern Thyroid Clinic started as like a brick and mortar, normal, run of the mill practice that specialized in thyroid and hormone disorders for anyone, but we mainly serve women, like
Right.
99% women. And eventually, we were having people fly in from all over the country, all over the world. We had an almost 7,000 person wait list. And I was like, we probably need to take this nationwide. We need to expand access because the hypothyroidism is incredibly common. It's
Mhm.
absolutely more complex than medicine gives it credit for.
Mhm.
And so many people are stuck and don't have anywhere to go. And so we're expanding nationwide. We're almost in all 50 states at this point.
So is it virtual or you're actually physically
Virtual.
in? Okay, so you're virtually in almost all 50 states. Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
So obviously, like you just said, there was this need. You had a list of 7,000 people waiting to see your clinicians. Why is that? Why
Yeah.
do so many people have a thyroid condition? Or I should say, actually, why do so many women have thyroid conditions? Why is it so prevalent?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. I think some of which is clear in the literature and some of which is yet to be discovered. A large portion of people with thyroid conditions have an autoimmune condition called
Hmm.
Hashimoto's,
Hmm.
where their body attacks their thyroid gland and sort of erodes away that hormonal secreting tissue and just leaves kind of non functional, scarry, inflammatory tissue. And that subsequently leads to hypothyroidism. And I think autoimmune diseases are on the rise. They're
Hmm.
driven by lifestyle, inflammation, things that unfortunately we're exposed to and kind of have normalized in our everyday life at this point. And so I think rates are climbing. But in addition to that, what I think isn't explained is women are just slowly losing thyroid function over time as we age. And I think we underestimate the amount of women that are experiencing that. And I think that is largely due to like environmental influences, the same way that we're kind of all walking around vitamin D deficient for no reason. We
But
are rapidly losing function.
yeah, so just to clarify there, do you think so women has that always happened and now it's just happening more as we age? Or are you
I
just
think
saying
so.
it's something that like we didn't recognize or understand before?
It's hard to say because I'm a data miner. Like I
Right.
collect data. And so I can understand patterns and what's happening in my patient population because we are constantly looking for more and more data. And I wasn't around 50, 100 years ago
Hmm.
analyzing that data. So it's hard for me to say. I would presume that actually the incidence is increasing, meaning more women are experiencing this because hormonal
Right,
disruptors
right,
are rampant. And I
right.
think this falls into that same category.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we didn't have all the endocrine disruptors in our environment that, years ago that we do now. So, and stress we know is
Absolutely.
worse. There's more things causing inflammation. So all of that
Mhm.
makes sense. Okay, so I also think aside from all of these women knowing they have a thyroid issue y- y- and obviously that's like that's this huge number. I think there's also so many women that are walking around undiagnosed
Mhm.
and don't know what's going on and they think it's perimenopause or they think it's just aging or they just have
Mhm.
no idea what's wrong with them and they are being like you were blown off by their
Yeah.
doctors.
Yeah.
So why do you think so many people are also not diagnosed or misdiagnosed? Do you think there's a lack of awareness even in the medical community? Do you think I mean I don't know what is the reason for that you see?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack
I
here, Keri.
I know.
So,
I
um,
know that's such a big one. So
it
I know.
is, but
There's so
it's
much. I told you we're probably gonna need a part two because this is a big
right.
topic.
It is. And you know what? Like, this is where the rubber meets the road for me. Like,
Hmm.
this is where and how and why Modern Thyroid Clinic exists. So,
Right.
essentially, every patient who has come to us has been told one of two things. You don't have a thyroid disorder, even
Hmm.
though they do, or your symptoms are not due to your thyroid labs are fine. And
Hmm.
guess what? 100% of our patients did have a thyroid problem that's causing these symptoms and had essentially already been told by at least one, usually multiple clinicians, that that's not the case. Our training in medicine for thyroid conditions is grossly and, dare I say, negligently oversimplified. So there's a few barriers. One is we are not running appropriate labs. We are
Hmm.
working hard to save insurance companies money
Hmm.
and running one preliminary lab, TSH, maybe two, of which
Hmm.
correlate with one another. So that's number one. We're not
Yep.
getting a full thyroid panel. Number two is there is no standardized range actually for what is normal for thyroid labs. There
Hmm.
is not this objective measurable range that everyone references to determine if someone has a thyroid problem. Every lab's definition of normal is actually different. And your clinician, when they look at your labs, they literally hold up the lab result, they scan it to see if anything's in bold. And if it's not, they assume it's normal. So they
Right.
are basically just believing whatever each individual lab says is normal, which
Right.
is crazy.
Well, it's
Yeah.
crazy. And then also there's obviously just the personalization there too, where even if there was a standardization, it still doesn't mean that it's normal just because it's normal, right? Like you have to look at the
Mhm.
full picture of the person. So anyway, side note.
Yeah. And normal is not optimal. Like,
Right.
you can
Right.
be in the normal range for a lab. And I mean, I was completely debilitated.
Hmm.
We see this all day, every day. And in fact, we need to revise those ranges. We need to make them more narrow. We need to make them more targeted.
Hmm.
Instead, sadly, those ranges are getting wider. They are not getting more narrow in medicine. So we are getting much, much further from where we need to go. And then lastly, the
Hmm.
other big piece of this problem that's plaguing women who are diagnosed with a thyroid disorder was kind of similar to my own issue of people are being put on one kind of medication.
Hmm.
And when that medication doesn't work, the assumption is it's because it's not your thyroid that's driving your symptoms, which is blatantly wrong. A lot of people cannot use that category of medicine and will never actually get better on it. But instead of looking at alternatives, we're simply dismissing women and telling them, oh, yeah, this is just life, eat less, exercise more. This isn't your thyroid because
Hmm.
you're on medicine and your labs are fine. When in fact, kind of like antibiotics, right? If an antibiotic doesn't work for someone, guess
Hmm.
we change the antibiotic until we find one that works. And that is not our approach in medicine still. And there are wonderful medications that do work in much better ways, but they are not offered to people.
Yeah, I want to get into that because I've heard that before, and I do know exactly what you're talking about as far as, I mean, there's like right one or two medications that everyone goes on when there's a thyroid issue, and that's it. And that's pretty much that's it. And this should work. And if it doesn't, yeah, I agree. I agree. I've heard that story many times. So I actually want to dive into that and understand why more doctors don't understand these other medications. But I want to go back to the labs first because I really want to get clear on the labs because I think this is
Yeah.
something that people, one, they should be empowered to look at their labs and understand to some extent, or at least know what to then ask and go further on
Mhm.
with their doctor. And I don't think people understand. Like you said, it's TSH. They know they get tested for TSH. That's really
Mhm.
it. So can you explain TSH versus T3 and T4
Mhm.
for those people that don't know? And then can you explain further what people should be asking for to get that complete picture? Because like you said, many doctors, they'll just look at TSH and then move on.
I love this question. Part of my mission in my life is like to supply women with as much possible information as they
Yeah.
can get their hands on to navigate this.
Yeah.
because thyroid issues are patient driven. Like we are the ones that have to drive this
Right.
conversation and lead ourselves to get the care that we need. So, and I can also put a link, like I can share a link with you where people can download my free thyroid lab guide so they don't have to furiously write all of this down.
That would be amazing. That would be
Yeah.
incredible. Thank you so much.
Yes. So, TSH basically is a hormone that comes from your brain. It's called your thyroid stimulating hormone, and your pituitary sends it to your thyroid to determine how much production you need. So it does exactly what it says. It stimulates your thyroid, right? So in times when you don't quite have enough output or production of true thyroid hormones, because again, this is a brain hormone, this isn't a thyroid hormone, it's supposed to send a message back to your brain and say, oh my gosh, we need more thyroid hormone.
Mhm.
Increase this person's TSH, stimulate her thyroid more so that we can have access to more thyroid hormones. And inversely, when you have plenty, it's supposed to reduce your TSH. Now, that is depending on that entire system working properly, which
Mhm.
it doesn't a huge portion of the time. Research shows about 35% of the time there's a
Wow.
defect in the communication between TSH and your output hormones. I estimate that to be way more than that. So
Wow.
we do need TSH. I think about TSH as how much energy is your body putting in or wasting to produce thyroid hormones.
Mhm.
Okay. But then we need to know what your thyroid hormones are, right?
Right.
So we need to know what are the actual numbers of your production. And those are free T4, which is an
Mhm.
inactive hormone. It's completely inert and dependent on us activating it. I give an analogy of like crude oil.
Mhm.
We don't really put crude oil in our car to make it run, but we do need it to make gasoline to put in our car to make it run, right? But we've
Mhm.
got to convert it first. We have to activate it first. Same mechanism here. So your thyroid produces T4 largely, and that T4 is then activated and converted to your most important hormone that no one ever checks, free T3. Okay. Free T3 is like your gasoline. It's what we need to fuel our body, our
Mhm.
metabolism, our hair, our skin, our digestion, hormones, libido, all of the things. And a lot of people cannot convert crude oil to gasoline effectively.
Mhm.
And so we are missing a huge piece of the picture if we're not checking someone's active thyroid hormone or free T3. This is not to be confused with total T3, which actually is pretty useless, to be honest. And sometimes people end up getting that checked. And then lastly, as far as thyroid function goes, there's one more hormone that's really important. It's an inhibitory hormone called reverse T3, and
Mhm.
that blocks your active hormone from absorbing. So if you have a really high reverse T3 and your T3 looks great and no one ever checks this, guess what?
Right.
We're
It's not
never going
doing
to know.
anything. Right. Right.
Right. Totally. So reverse T3 is important as well. And then in addition to that, the sad thing is a lot of people are not being screened for Hashimoto's. So it is very important to know if you have an autoimmune disorder that needs to be addressed, looked at, known. It puts you at risk for other autoimmune diseases. So checking TPO or thyroid peroxidase antibodies and thyroglobulin should also be part of the picture.
That is so amazing that you just like broke that all down. I think that everyone listening, go back, rewind, listen to that over a few times, and then go to your doctor and get tested for all of those things if you
Yeah,
think there's an issue. Or really just even if anyone should just have those tested at some point anyway, just
we
to have
should.
them tested to have a baseline, right?
Absolutely.
But also, like you said, you're gonna give us a download too, so that's amazing. So you can also download McCall's uh, printout, right, of all those thyroid labs, and then you'll have that to bring with you to your doctor too, and you can ask about all those things. That's so incredibly helpful. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. So, but let's go further there. So you
Mhm.
just like broke down what we should be testing, and again, so many
Yeah.
doctors are just testing that one thyroid hormone. That's it, and they're not going further. But why is that?
Mhm.
Why are so many doctors not do like I still don't understand. I know you kind of already answered that and to some extent, but just like I know you said like even just, saving insurance companies money and that, but
Mhm.
it's just I don't know, I guess it's just mind-blowing to me.
Oh, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing, all right, it's devastating. It's a sad thing in medicine in that Medicine is almost inherited. So evolving things that we've done for or evolving things that we've done for a long time takes, like, research shows it takes 17 years from something new to come out in literature that proves something to trickle down into everyday practice. Well, that is two generations of women's
Mm-hmm.
prime years where we should be enjoying our life and having kids and having fun and having energy. It takes a really long time. And the sad part is we are not investing in research even to move this forward. And so if I had to boil it down to one reason, it is we are not being trained in medicine how to interpret these labs and what they mean. So thyroid is grossly oversimplified.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 1 + 1 = 2. If this person's TSH is above, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 20 now, then you treat them with this one class of medication and that's it. So
Mm-hmm.
everything is very programmatic and not a lot of constructive, like not deep thinking is going into this. And so the reality is if you ask your clinician to run a full thyroid panel, most likely you'll sadly be met with resistance because they don't know how to interpret that panel.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't like to feel like they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so they'll simply say no. And then insurance companies complicate it more by punishing them if they're ordering too many labs and removing them from their provider network.
Okay, so actually jumping off from there where you just said interpreting the labs. So let's say
Mhm.
someone does go to the doctor and actually I want to take it back. I'll go back even a step further.
Yeah.
Who do because I just said, bring this to your doctor, but who do you think should be tested and should ask for a full thyroid panel?
Call me biased, Keri, but I think every woman
Okay. Okay. I
should.
mean that
So,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's what I was kind of saying, but
especially.
I didn't want to assume that you would think that. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. You're spot on. And I mean, especially if you have symptoms of hypothyroidism,
Mhm.
people say they're non-specific, they're too general, that they truly aren't just thyroid. If you have a constellation of thyroid symptoms, the likelihood that you have a thyroid problem, if you're a woman, especially a woman with children, is extraordinarily high.
Do you think people confuse perimenopause with thyroid symptoms sometimes?
I do, and I think they're actually quite different and they're easy to differentiate, but
Mhm.
I think women are a little more aware of perimenopause and menopause. And in that season of their life, they're like, okay, this is what's supposed to be happening to me. This must be what this is.
Mhm.
When a lot of times it's thyroid, and thyroid sort of precedes a lot of perimenopause issues as well because it grossly impacts our hormones.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. Interesting. Okay, so going back to the interpreting labs. So now let's say someone goes to the doctor, they do this, they get all their labs done. The interpretation part, like how, like you said, the numbers vary. There is no standard. So, I mean, we might be getting too into the nitty gritty here, but can you tell us some of the numbers that you look for? So then at
Mhm.
least women can say, even if their doctor says, well, this looks normal, I mean, at least empower them with, well, I've heard that, or there's another opinion on this to at least be able
Mhm.
to ask some questions and peel back the layers a little bit more for themselves.
And just know if this is something they need to pursue, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
do I need to be advocating? Do I need to be
Exactly.
trying to find someone to help me? That's all
Exactly.
totally also in my thyroid lab guide. So I actually freely share our proprietary ranges at Modern Thyroid Clinic, which we've developed over a decade. So essentially, when we first started years ago, the official Modern Thyroid Clinic, and I'd already been treating thyroid for years, we started sort of with these more progressive ranges where we narrowed down the normal range from
Mhm.
took a little off the top, took a little off the bottom,
Mhm.
and we're left with more narrow margins. Every 9 to 12 months for the last 10 years, based on our own patients' data of, hey, where are these people having symptoms versus
Mhm.
where are they not? We've narrowed those margins down more and more and more. And now we're left with ranges that are literally this wide compared to normal, which are like as wide as the rooms that we're sitting in right now. So
Wow.
um, I truly believe people's thyroid function needs to be perfect, like absolutely perfect for women to feel like themselves, to have a high sense of vitality, to thrive.
Mm.
Anything less than that is not good enough. And so, in an effort to again allow women to advocate for their health and understand what's happening in their body, I freely share those ranges. So people can totally download those. I can tell them verbally too if you want.
Yeah, well, yeah, throw it out there. Throw it out
Okay.
there. Why not? We're having the conversation. But then, yes, everyone, again, in the show notes, there will be the link to that downloadable PDF. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Perfect.
exactly.
Perfect. So we can get that.
Um, Yeah, freely. So TSH, I like below 1.8. Anything above 1.8, and people start showing up with symptoms almost despite what their output hormones are. And I give the analogy of like when your TSH is too high, you're using more energy than you're producing. So you're in a deficit. Okay. So TSH should be below 1.8. Free T4, your inactive hormone, should be between about zero point 0.9 and 1.2.
Hmm.
And then free T3 should be between 3.6 and 4.2. And reverse T3 should be in between about 8 and 15. Antibodies, TPO should be less than 34, and thyroglobulin ideally less than 1.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much. This is
you
already
bet.
so helpful, I know, for so many people out there. Amazing. Okay, so let's talk about thyroid and cortisol
Mhm,
connection there, and how does
mhm.
cortisol levels, because cortisol has obviously been a really hot topic in the past X amount of years. I'm not sure why it became why it became so popular. Well, I mean, obviously people's, I think, stress over the past few years has increased dramatically, but it's obviously been important for many reasons for forever. But how does that impact our thyroid, and how does our thyroid impact cortisol?
I love that you said like it is bidirectional, like
Yeah.
it goes both ways. So when you have a thyroid disorder, when you have thyroid dysfunction, even mild, your adrenal glands, the glands that sit on top of your kidneys that secrete cortisol and like our stress hormones, they try to compensate for poor thyroid function. And so they start increasing cortisol production. And so people walk around in a heightened adrenal state. And then over time, like anything that's kind of overused, overactivated, their adrenal function gets depleted and it gets worn down. Um, on the flip side of the conversation, when you have increases in cortisol, your body doesn't like to activate your thyroid hormones. And this is a
Mm,
little nugget. This is why so many people do not do well on synthroid, levothyroxine, tyrosine. That's all an inactive hormone. It's all T4. It's that crude oil hormone. When you have increases in cortisol, your body halts the activation of that crude oil hormone,
wow.
stops it from being converted. And so people end up with hypothyroid symptoms because they can't activate either their endogenous crude oil hormone or
Mhm.
T4 or the medication that they're taking. And so
Mm.
they end up on levothyroxine for their entire lives and they never actually feel well.
Wow. Oh, that's so fascinating. Wow. Okay. So
Mhm,
as you mentioned the meds before, and that when people go on a couple of these meds like Synthroid, and they don't feel better, they just
mhm,
doctors kind of don't know where to go. Many doctors
mhm.
don't know where to go. And you said that there are these alternative medications, but most people aren't being given them. Why? What are those? How do they
Yeah.
work? And why are so few people being put on them?
Yeah. So we'll start with what they are. So they are active thyroid hormone or a medication with at least part active thyroid hormone. So
Hmm.
think your gasoline hormone, think your T3 hormone.
Hmm.
Okay. So pure T3, there's a medication called Cytomel. The generic is liothyronine. That is just plain old active hormone. You can take it on its own. You can layer it into taking it with levothyroxine to balance these two hormones appropriately. And then there's also combination medications. These are things like Armour thyroid, NP thyroid, and a new one that's coming out called Ren thyroid.
Hmm.
That's what's referred to as desiccated thyroid. It actually comes from pig thyroid gland, and it's a combination of inactive and active hormone. Um, all of these meds can be picked up from like your regular pharmacy. They're nothing special, like you can get them at Walgreens. So
Hmm.
it's not a lack of access. But I'll tell you, I can summarize perfectly why people aren't offered these medications. And I can tell you verbatim what I was taught in my medical training that so many physicians have also said, aligned with me, and said that was their training as well. And it is do not use medications with T3 in them or active thyroid hormone. Only use medications that are T4, so levothyroxine, Synthroid, Unithroid, Tirosint,
Hmm.
Levoxyl. If you put your patients on active thyroid hormone, you will give them a heart attack or a stroke, which is wildly untrue. But
Where did
as
that
you
come
can see,
from?
In extreme cases, you can give someone a heart attack and a stroke. And I mean, about 20 times the dose that clinicians would use. It's not like one dose too far, it's gross medical negligence that would propagate that sort of a
Okay.
response. Um, and so there's a couple dynamics happening in that conversation. One is we are not trained how to use these meds, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one is sitting down with us saying, well, if you have a treatment resistant patient with thyroid symptoms that isn't getting well on Synthroid or levothyroxine, maybe try this. Here's how to do it. No, that's not what's happening. So we're not trained
Mm-hmm.
we're trained not to use them. We're not trained how to use them. And we're trained to be very afraid of them. We're innately terrified now that anyone that's on these meds is going to have a heart attack or a stroke.
Right.
And even with us, it's a problem when our patients go to their primary care doctor and
Right.
they're on the tiniest bit of T3 and their primary care doctor's like, oh, why are you on this? This is so
Right.
dangerous. Oh my
Right.
goodness. Um,
It kind of
they're afraid of
reminds me of the menopause therapy conversation, the
absolutely
menopause
so many.
hormone therapy conversation. Yeah.
At least that's progressing, right? A
Absolutely,
giant study came
absolutely,
out last
absolutely.
year
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah, no,
debunks that.
there has been a lot of progression there in the past couple of
Mhm,
years, but a few years ago, it reminds me of that same
mhm.
conversation. So many no, you can't go on hormones for menopause or
And that's still
perimenopause.
happening.
Yeah,
That's happening.
it absolutely still happening, but like you
Yeah.
said, it has progressed
Yeah.
in a very good way over the past couple of years. So anyway, sorry, it's
Thank
just as you're
goodness.
saying this, I'm like, it's reminding me of that same issue.
Mhm. Totally. Absolutely. And, years ago, so Armour thyroid, which is one of those combination medications, was actually the first thyroid medication that was around. It was around half of a century before levothyroxine came around.
Mhm.
And back then in like 1920, actually until about 1980, Armour wasn't stable. It wasn't predictable. It was hard to control. It was really difficult to know how much you were getting in each dose. That has been rectified for like 50 years now. Like we've been good and things are pretty darn stable in that category of meds, but medicine hasn't adapted to that. We still refer to Armour as, oh my gosh, why would anyone take that? It's so unpredictable. It's actually
Right,
not. It's very predictable. But
right.
again, we're operating on antiquated information.
So, do you find in your practice that more women are on these other types of medications versus the traditional T4?
100% of our patients are on some form of T3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you don't have anyone just on straight Synthroid.
Mm-mm.
Wow. That is fascinating.
Yeah. Now, I think people who do well on Synthroid, they also don't need us, right? Like they can go to their
Mm.
primary care doc and get their Synthroid and life is fine.
Mhm.
So they don't have to keep searching for answers. For people to make it to us, they're desperate. They've
Okay.
tried everything. They've been to 5 doctors and we're
Okay.
like their last resort. So the data is a
Okay.
little skewed in that regard.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. That absolutely makes
Yeah.
sense. So you are saying, right, there are many women out there who, right, Synthroid going on just that T4 would be perfect and fine and great. Because I was going to say, I'm like, I know a lot of people on medications like that who it does work great for. But okay, so you're saying once
Mhm.
they've made it to you because they've had they've continued to have all of these different issues. Okay, super interesting
Yeah.
though. But how amazing that you're then able to help
Mhm.
them and give them
Yeah.
answers and solutions. And I mean, that means that 100% of the people that come to your practice are obviously having life-changing results if they haven't been able
Yeah.
to have success elsewhere. That's just wow, that's
It's so cool.
incredible. It's
It's
so
so cool.
cool. It's amazing. Wow. Okay, let's talk a little bit about lifestyle and thyroid
Okay.
because I do
Mhm.
think that's one of those things where, for me in my position as a dietitian, nutritionist, coach,
Yeah.
there's so many things that we talk about that we can do with lifestyle. So many
Yep.
things, obviously, before we go to a medication. And there's
Mhm.
so many things we can do with our sleep and managing stress and food. And
Mhm.
we know all of that. I have found like thyroid is one of those things that it's really hard, no matter how well you do with your
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's really hard to control without medication if there's a true issue. So I'm curious from your perspective,
Mhm.
what you feel about that, and then also what are those tips? And we're probably very aligned, but what are those tips that you give people to improve their lifestyle? Because obviously you don't just put them on their medication and say be on your way. I'm sure
Right.
you treat them in a more holistic way. So yeah,
For
that
sure. I love that you brought up this question too. It's great. Like we're packing in so much valuable information into this one interview. I
I
love it.
told you I had so much to ask you. I was so excited to get to, to get here with you today. So I love
I
it.
love it. So there's two, I want to separate out two kind of foundational areas. One is Hashimoto's. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
Hashimoto's is that autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm.
Regular medicine views autoimmune diseases as like random, like you won the reverse lottery. We're so sorry that you have this thing. There's nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Functional and more integrative holistic medicine actually
Right.
views autoimmune diseases as very much able to be influenced,
Mm-hmm.
largely with lifestyle. I'm a perfect example of that. I had very severe Hashimoto's. I've been in remission for over a decade. I used to have a giant goiter on my neck from Hashimoto's. It's completely gone. So, figuring out ways to reduce inflammation and stressors on your physiology is a big deal for Hashimoto's.
Mm-hmm.
You know, dairy is a very common inflammatory food for people with Hashimoto's. Next up is gluten. So, even something as simple as, hey, what if we reduce that inflammatory load in one or both of
Right.
those ways? And then some micronutrients, selenium, things like that can also help mitigate Hashimoto's. So, that's kind of that. And you can go so deep. You can go so deep down the
Mm-hmm.
Hashimoto's rabbit hole of lifestyle. So that's kind of touching on it lightly. And then over here is thyroid function, right? Hypothyroidism. And I want to zoom very deeply into this mechanism of converting and activating your hormones, of
Mm-hmm.
taking your crude oil and making it into gasoline, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately that's what we need. Okay. And remember that tertiary hormone called reverse T3, that's an
Mm-hmm.
inhibitory hormone. Your body uses that whole activation system very intentionally. And so, when your body wants you to recover, when it wants you to lay flat on your back and rest and heal and recover, what it does is it does not allow you to activate your hormones, and it shunts a lot of those hormones to your inhibitory hormone, your reverse T3. So, you cannot bind and use the T3 even that you have, and it suppresses the production of that T3 as well. So if you think about this mechanism, it's like it's purposeful, right? Like our
Mm-hmm.
body is, it's a smart thing. And so when we're inflamed, when we eat
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of inflammatory food,
Mm-hmm.
when we're super stressed, when we're not sleeping, when we're micronutrient depleted, when we're overly calorically restricted, when we're over exercising, when we're
Mm-hmm.
pregnant, when we're breastfeeding, when we're ill, it shunts those hormones to reverse T3 and lowers your ability to have access to T3. Why? So that you go to recovery mode. Like you lay
Mm-hmm.
down, like I did when I was 27, and you spend 16 hours in bed every day, right? Because it wants
Right.
you to heal. And so if you reverse engineer that, being sure you get a lot of micronutrients,
Mm-hmm.
eating a low inflammatory diet, exercising, but not taxing your body
Right.
so incredibly much, meditation, stress reduction, good sleep hygiene,
Mm-hmm.
getting enough sleep. All of these things directly impact your ability to produce your hormones. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people don't do well on levothyroxine and Synthroid is because our standard American lifestyle at this point,
Right.
there is a built-in amount of poor activation of thyroid hormones that's almost expected.
Right. Right. That makes so much sense. So you're giving it, like you said, the crude oil, but if you're doing all the things that are working against it, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Totally.
Wow. Okay. So interesting. Okay, let's talk about thyroid and heart disease, the connection
Mm,
there. Because I feel, I know, well, there's obviously this connection, but I know, again, a lot of women that develop thyroid issues as they're getting older. And we know that heart disease is, I mean, the number one killer for everyone, but we know
mhm,
women over the age of 50. And also, as women, as estrogen goes down and women
mhm.
are aging, their cholesterol levels are going up. So, can you pull that together for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So early signs on labs of a thyroid issue are elevations in your blood sugar and your cholesterol. I'm a perfect example. When I was 27 and I went to the doctor to get help, he didn't want to adjust my thyroid meds, but guess what? He wanted to put me on Lipitor for my high cholesterol. Yeah. Which was literally just due to my thyroid problem. So
Yeah.
I fixed my thyroid problem. I'm
I mean,
many
and
years older than that now.
I
Still
don't,
don't have cholesterol
Well, and
issues.
can you imagine had you just said,
No,
"Okay," and gone on Lipitor, and you would have continued to
forever.
feel and to
Right.
right, forever, and also you would have just continued just again, just masking something, just throwing a Band-Aid on something, and you probably would
Mhm.
have just continued to feel horrible.
And then no one ever wants to take you off Lipitor once you're on
Right.
Lipitor. They're like, "You're on this for life, sister. Like, we're never taking you off." So, very quickly, you start to get elevations in your cholesterol. And it's, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? It's the same mechanism of action why people gain weight when they have a thyroid problem. Our metabolism slows, it starts to break down. We become insulin resistant. And that's foundationally what's going to lead to all of these other issues. And so, it is so wildly important to solve a thyroid problem before you band-aid a cholesterol
Right.
issue, because if enough time happens, you're going to have a cholesterol issue. I was reading a study a couple weeks ago that looked at cholesterol panels for people with what's defined as subclinical hypothyroidism. So, thyroid patients who wouldn't be treated conventionally,
Mhm.
and they absolutely have cholesterol panel issues. And I mean, that's not a surprise to me. I consider people who are subclinical hypothyroidism overt hypothyroidism.
Right.
Like, I
Right.
think those
They
people
need to be
desperately need
treated.
help.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
But even medicine is recognizing, oh, these people we're not treating even have cholesterol issues. So something needs to be done. We need to unwind that
Mhm.
and actually help these people.
So important that you're bringing that up, though, because I think that there are so many, especially women,
Mhm,
middle-aged women that go to the doctor and are put on something like a Lipitor and don't
mhm,
don't dig deeper. And so even just
mhm.
this conversation right here, I think what you were saying, it's so helpful to then at least ask the question of, could it possibly be my thyroid? Is that maybe why my cholesterol is elevated? To at least have that conversation. And again, I think that's so empowering to women listening here to at least like know some of these things to ask about to because we do it. So many people, you go to the doctor and you just like trust what they say there. And it's not that they're not I don't want to. I don't want to feel like I've been really, beating up doctors
Mhm.
here in this conversation. I don't mean it that way. But it's like if it's not something you're doing every day, and you are used
Right.
to prescribing, a Lipitor, and you do see, okay, then someone's cholesterol levels go down. Okay, they're doing fine. They're doing
Yep.
better. And if you're seeing that, again, I don't blame them. But talking to someone like you, that's helping women on such a deeper, more root level, like it's just I think it's empowering for people for women especially to have this information. So I'm really grateful you're sharing it with us today.
Yeah. And then going back, I just want to expand for one moment on the menopause piece.
Oh yeah.
So, like, then menopause comes, and estrogen is protective against insulin resistance.
Mhm.
So, the moment we lose that estrogen, we have an increased risk. I mean, not even an increased risk. It definitely, we are primed for insulin resistance, which leads to cholesterol issues.
Mhm.
We are at higher risk for autoimmune disease because
Mhm.
estrogen is anti inflammatory. And also, with that loss of estrogen, we very quickly tend to start to deposit fat around our vital organs,
Mhm.
which is again inflammatory. That's why we tend to gain weight in our midsection,
Mhm.
which is directly linked to metabolic disease and high
Right.
cholesterol and high blood sugar, et cetera. So we're at a compounded risk at menopause, even independent of thyroid. So then you mix thyroid into that issue as well, and it's exponentially, more significant.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's why I mean you really have to stay on top of all of these things and
Mhm.
look at your labs and look at your labs regularly, not just once a year. I always say that too. Like
Totally.
getting your labs done once a year is at least at midlife and on is not
Mhm.
enough. So
Agreed.
I asked my followers on Instagram if they had any questions, and a few of them,
Yeah.
most of them, we've actually already gotten to in the questions that I had. But I have a couple specifics here that I also want to ask you before we end. Someone asked, "Can you talk about the link between thyroid conditions, subclinical hypothyroid, and vitiligo and anemia?"
Mhm. Yeah. So vitiligo is an autoimmune disease. And I mean, research shows 80% of people with hypothyroidism is due to the autoimmune disease
Hmm.
Hashimoto's. Okay. I don't find that to be exactly true. I don't think it's quite 80%, but a huge percentage of
Hmm.
us, when you have one autoimmune disease, you are at an increased risk of developing another of over
Mm.
30%. Okay. And the reason for that is I want people to think about root cause. Like Hashimoto's is a manifestation of something going on underneath the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever's going on underneath the surface is also potentially driving vitiligo. The first thing that I would think of in this kind of a case, if it were my patient, is does this person have celiac? So celiac is an autoimmune disease that results from eating gluten, and your body attacks the
Mm-hmm.
small intestinal villi, what absorb nutrients, that often leads to anemia. And then when
Right.
you have celiac, I'm a perfect example. I have celiac. That's what created my Hashimoto's. So then you have this constellation of autoimmune diseases. But even in the absence of celiac, this person with vitiligo with a thyroid issue,
Mm-hmm.
their gut is probably inflamed. They're
Mm-hmm.
probably not absorbing the iron that they need because the absorption mechanisms are too inflamed to appropriately absorb
Right.
that and utilize it. So
Right.
I would definitely dig in deep to gut for sure, but I would also recommend that that person maybe get screened for celiac.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you know you had celiac before you had the Hashimoto's?
So I had a thyroid problem first, didn't ever get checked for Hashimoto's for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
got put on meds, knew I was sick every time I ate from when I was a kid, but I'm kind of old enough where
Right. We
gluten-free
didn't
didn't
talk about
exist
that yet.
then.
Exactly. Well, that's
Like,
why I asked you, because I was like, you probably just always had stomach issues and things going on and you didn't even know it.
yeah, no one knew what gluten
Right.
was. Like,
Right.
that was not a
Right. Yeah.
thing.
We did
And
not talk
so
about that.
no, I don't even know if it was on clinicians' radar. I don't think it was back then. So eventually I figured out I was celiac and still was primed, still had Hashimoto's even after I figured that out and then had to go deeper, right? But those two things were heavily linked. If I was eating gluten now, I would have Hashimoto's absolutely for sure in a matter of
Right. Okay.
weeks, probably.
This next question, we touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to ask it still just to dive a little bit deeper because I am a dietitian
Yeah.
nutritionist. I have to ask. This question from this person, they say, are there certain foods recommended for controlling Hashimoto's for women? And I know the general answer, but love to hear that from you.
Yeah. So, you know what? Honestly, part of the way that I practice medicine is I'm like a realist and I like to have balance. Like the people that come to see us are desperate, they're exhausted, like they're at their end of their rope. So the last thing I want to do is them come in and me be like, listen, it's great to meet you. I know you can hardly wake up and put pants on every day. You're going to go on an autoimmune paleo diet for the rest of your life.
Right.
Like that's not what I want to do, right? Like that's
Right.
cruel. So I essentially recommend for all of our patients with Hashimoto's and thyroid issues a IgG inflammatory food panel. So looking at chronic inflammation over time from foods, what foods are driving that in the bulk in that
Mm-hmm.
person's unique physiology, so that I don't take a one size fits all approach. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what I
Smart.
recommend. But in the years of doing this, there are clear patterns. Like there
Right.
are very clear patterns for people with Hashimoto's, at least. That's what I can speak to. And definitely number one is dairy. So,
Mm-hmm.
about twice as often as I see gluten being an issue, I see dairy being an issue with these people. Not what I would have expected, but the data is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondary to that is gluten.
Mm-hmm.
If we kept going down the line, it would be dairy, gluten, grains, legumes,
Mm-hmm.
eggs, nuts. By the time you get to nuts and seeds, it's like 5% of people. Like it's rare that people have to go to that
Mm-hmm.
extreme, but in descending order, those are what I most commonly see.
Wow, so helpful. This has been so informative and so helpful. And I know we're probably going to get so many questions after this, just follow up questions. So I might have to ask you to come back again. But I am
I'd love
so
to.
grateful for your time today. Again, everyone listening, in the show notes, there will be a link to that incredible guide, that thyroid panel guide. So we're so grateful for that. My last question for you today is, how do you ignite your nutritious life on a daily basis?
Yeah. I would say it's hard for me to pick one, but I have two. So
That's great. You can give two.
yes. My first one is green juice. So, like, not
Mm,
smoothies, but green juice, where you can fit, 5 or 6 pounds of veggies into one tiny little serving that is void of fiber. So, it's so easy for your body to digest, absorb, and assimilate. Love green juice. It's also a very passive way for tired people to get in a lot of nutrients with
mm-hmm.
very little effort. And then, second for me, and this varies per person, but I personally, and with so many of my patients, am a huge advocate for a balanced intermittent fasting protocol. Intermittent fasting has absolutely changed my life. I would not
Mm.
be the productive person that I am today without it, for sure.
Wow. Okay. And how long do you fast for?
I'm so balanced with it. I don't fast more than 4 or 5 days a week, and I do like a 16-8 where I try to consume my
Hmm.
calories in an 8-hour window. Occasionally, I'll go longer. And I honestly recommend people listen to their body. So if I wake up hungry, I'm gonna eat. Like, I'm gonna
Hmm.
listen to my body. But inflammation's a big thing for me, and it impacts my inflammation in a positive way, unlike really
Yeah.
anything else.
I was just curious if you did 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Okay. Amazing. Again, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me.